maybe I'll get very philosophical and say, human beings are more than their work. And hopefully this frees us up to enjoy art and family and society and contribution to where we live, who we live with, preservation of our planet, all of these things in a way that can be hard to do when you're spending all your time grinding away. So that's what I hope for.
Hi, I'm Boaz, founder and CEO of Augmented AI Labs. I'm excited that you're tuning into the Shift AI podcast today, a show that explores what it takes to thrive and adapt to the changing workplace in the digital age of remote work and AI. In today's episode, I'm thrilled to have Sara Vaezy as our guest. Sara is the Executive Vice President and Chief Strategy and Digital Officer at Providence, where she's leading groundbreaking initiatives in healthcare AI implementation. With her strategic vision and expertise in digital transformation, Sara brings insights into how AI is revolutionizing healthcare delivery and patient care. If you're interested in how AI is transforming healthcare, the responsible implementation of generative AI in clinical settings, or the future of patient care and medical administration, you are not going to want to miss this episode. We also want to send out a special thank you to Augmented AI Labs for sponsoring this episode. This is going to be a great show, and we're super excited to talk to Sara today. We can't wait to learn more from her. Let's get to it. All right, Sara, thank you for joining the Shift AI podcast. I'm excited to talk with you today.
Thank you. I'm excited as well.
So I want to start out, I want to hear a little bit about your background, and I'm interested in kind of what led you to your role as EVP and Chief Strategy and Digital Officer at Providence. Maybe talk about kind of your early years, first job, different perspectives on healthcare.
Well, I actually, my first job was a small business that I started when I was a kid, playing piano for people's weddings. So very different from anything I do today, but it was very interesting. It gave me some really interesting perspectives on like service and how you meet people's needs. And then also how to do marketing. I called every florist in Seattle. Like this is back in the like Yellow Pages days. And I called each one of them and I asked them if they would put my flyer up like in their store somewhere. So that's how I got my clients. And so, it just sort of like how to hustle, how to like get out there. I'm not a very extroverted person. So like calling all those people was really tough for me. So, but it was a really like good experience. And then my second job was actually playing piano for the Seattle Girls Choir as an accompanist for the choir. And so it was both of those experiences really kind of taught me about like how you build a skill and then you can do things with it. Like for me, it was playing piano.
Yeah. Was there a family influence both on the creative side, but also on the entrepreneurial side? I mean, that's very entrepreneurial to go out and try to hustle like that.
I think I'm the only person in my family who was trained as a musician, and it was always just like a thing I was interested in. And I was fortunate that, my parents recognized it and encouraged me and helped me cultivate it by putting me in lessons for many, many years and driving me places. And, so that was really lucky. And I think, if they had been like born in the US which I wasn't born here either, but I grew up here. And if they had grown up here or like they had, different backgrounds, they might have been interested in that. So I also just kind of was like, hey, you got this opportunity, you might as well grab it and go for it. So
where are your parents from and where were you born?
So we're from Iran and both my parents are Iranian. I was born there and we're from like northern Iran, which is a very mountainous and kind of subtropical, very beautiful place.
So tell the audience a little bit about what led you to the role that you have now. I mean, what's so interesting about what you're doing is you're really driving AI innovation at Providence, which is a pretty large healthcare provider. And I wonder kind of what led you to that role. And then we can talk more about kind of the stuff that you're doing, which I think is fascinating.
So I've been with Providence for just about 9 years. In January, it'll be 9 years. And I've been serving as the Chief Strategy Officer and the Chief Digital Officer for about the last 3. But I joined into the digital team as a technical advisor. It's sort of a role of like almost like a special projects and chief of staff for the former chief digital officer, who was my boss and a great mentor to me. But before that, I didn't have much background in software. I learned everything when I came to Providence just around software and frankly, like entrepreneurship and innovation within the context of healthcare. Before I came here, I worked in management consulting, in healthcare, but management consulting, specifically focused on mostly strategy and payer provider partnerships and things like that. Before that, I worked in health policy and health services research. So very like hardcore healthcare nerd stuff. And I started out my career as a scientist in the field of bioengineering and specifically therapeutic ultrasound for a variety of different applications. So it was a bit nonlinear. And I explored different things. I always had an interest for sort of problem solving and new stuff that was a little bit more on the sort of forefront or a little bit more on the vanguard of what was being done. And really I was very fortunate to be able to come to Providence at a time when digital health was still relatively nascent, and AI, the work that we were doing in AI at Providence, was perhaps further ahead than some other health systems, but nonetheless, in the grand scheme of things, we were still in very early innings, but got some of the foundational knowledge around how technology works, how to do innovation that has helped along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was excited to talk with you today for a number of reasons. One, you were at Providence thinking about digital health during the pandemic. And that really, really accelerated some of the ideas that you guys had. I want to hear about that. And the second thing is the timing around what you guys are doing with AI is interesting, because there are not a lot of businesses that are going as deep as you guys are in general. And then also there's not a lot of healthcare providers that are really tackling it in the way that you guys are. So maybe just take people back to that acceleration that happened during the pandemic and what you guys were doing and thinking about, and then how you adjusted.
It was a very interesting time. And we were, our group is focused on a few things thematically. One was enabling access for our patients and taking a lot of the principles from outside of healthcare in digital transformation more generally, which is like, how do you bring customers and providers or producers together, right? And take out the intermediaries, remove the friction, make it a lot easier. And we were fundamentally focused on that, and access to care was a big aspect of that. And access could have meant, either accessing us in a physical clinic or in a virtual setting, or even in certain sort of self-service types of access to those types of self-service offerings. And what ended up happening at Providence was one of the first, we were actually the first health system in the United States to treat a patient that had COVID. So we were early in the process. I think it was January of 2020. Lockdowns and things like that across the country started happening mostly in March, but we saw the first patient in January. So we had a bit of a head start. And we also had a couple of things that we were working on that put us a little bit in a position to be able to handle it from a digital perspective. One was that we had built a platform that actually turned into a company called DexCare, which is now a venture-backed startup that they've gone through their Series C. They're doing amazing. They're based in Seattle, led by a gentleman named Derek Street. We were utilizing DexCare at the time, or the platform that later became DexCare, as a mechanism to basically drive multimodal care. And what we meant by that was like either schedule a physical appointment or get you into a virtual visit, but all sort of in one platform and getting you to the right care at the right time. And when COVID happened, or when COVID really started to ramp up, there were either state mandates or just necessity to close clinics, and a lot of in-person care went away. And virtual care 30x overnight. And we were able to ramp up along with it. through that platform. And then as physical care came back into play, we were able to direct people to the right, where there was capacity, where the need would be met for them. And there's sort of a lot of intelligence in the background that operates that platform. Simultaneously, we launched something that has now since evolved into something very sophisticated around, we were the first health system that had basically a very simple symptom screener for COVID. And it helped folks. We were, our EDs were overwhelmed. There were emergency departments were overwhelmed. We were getting, a lot of our clinics weren't open. And so we were just getting a lot of folks that were not able to, they were either crowding and getting, in the emergency department and getting exposed, or they just couldn't get the care. And some folks really needed to know, there was also just a panic everywhere. And so we launched this screening chatbot, very simple, and we're able to keep a lot of folks at home and reassure them. And simultaneously, we also launched what we call remote patient monitoring for folks that did have COVID, and we were able to remotely track them by asking them to take their blood oxygen and their temperature, at regular intervals and input it. And if they were decompensating, we could actually proactively reach out to them. So a lot of tools that had been talked about, that was the first time they really operated at scale. In addition to the core infrastructure that we had, the core infrastructure around our electronic medical record and other things, of course, has always been operating at full scale. But some of these more novel solutions really started to get momentum during that time. And then it has, in many ways, been lasting. So, we brought a lot of folks online with us. We now have the mechanism to engage with them online more, even outside of a specific episode of care. And that chatbot has now turned into a pretty sophisticated intent recognition, self-service navigation platform that we can talk about more.
Before we go further with the interview, I want to tell you about one of our podcast sponsors, Augmented AI Labs, and how they're transforming businesses through intelligent AI solutions. Augmented AI Labs specializes in helping organizations unlock their potential with Gen AI, starting with your most valuable asset, your business knowledge. Their comprehensive process begins by identifying critical workflow challenges and knowledge needs, then building custom solutions that make your company's expertise instantly accessible. The Augmented AI Labs team combines fine-tuning and retrieval methods to ensure your AI solutions truly understand your business context. They thoroughly test and validate each solution, ensuring it delivers measurable value before creating a detailed technical blueprint for deployment. The real beauty of partnering with Augmented AI Labs is that they don't just stop at strategy. They build, deploy, and manage these solutions for you, continuously improving your knowledge systems while you focus on what you do best. If you're ready to transform how your organization leverages AI and knowledge, visit augmentedAIlabs.com and click on the Contact Us button. That's augmentedAIlabs.com. Now back to the episode. I'm very interested in companies that are integrating AI into their businesses and really applying it. And I know that you guys have allocated a pretty large percentage of your budget towards AI solutions. And so can you lay out some of the ways that you guys are implementing things, just to give everyone kind of a lay of the land? Because you're doing it in a bunch of different category segments.
We are. And the one thing I'll say before I jump into specific examples is we were very intentional about redeploying resources as opposed to adding incremental. It's an interesting sort of phenomenon in healthcare as compared to other industries, where most industries, when they've layered in technology, they've seen costs go down. And in healthcare, we haven't. We've seen costs continue to rise. And so we've had a hard time as an industry consolidating the gains of all of these different technologies. So we've been very intentional about saying, look, we need to pay attention to it. We need to deploy resources against it, but we're not going to just add. We have to redeploy. So that's been a really a core principle of the work that we've done. And some of the work, I'll tell you a little bit more about what we've done with this intent recognition engine and focused on navigation in just a moment. But we broke it up into into, I would say, like almost like elements of the technical stack, meaning like work around infrastructure, data, monitoring and observability. And then we've done work around the guardrails and ensuring that we're doing everything responsibly with both, ethical, like data ethics principles, proper information security processes, proper process around just evaluating whether something meets a priority or, and then how it works its way through our technology review systems. And then we've done work on the application development side of things as well. So a couple of the examples that have been actually, we're seeing already material impact, and it's really cool, is the navigation platform that I mentioned. Just to tell you a little bit more about that, there's a fundamental problem in healthcare, and it's getting worse, which is that our clinicians have something called an in-basket. An in-basket is like their inbox, like their email inbox or whatever, but it exists within the context of that provider. It's like their work queue. And there are lots of messages in that in-basket that get generated. We have 15 million messages every year that are getting generated, and that number has gone up considerably over the last 4+ years. And it's actually gone up almost 70% in a few years. So it's not a manageable volume for our clinicians. And there are lots of reasons why those messages are being generated. Some of them are being generated by other clinicians who want to do referrals or who want to get a consult. Some of them are generated by outside partners like payers and lab, et cetera. And some of them are generated by patients. And so when we thought, okay, there's actually a way to tackle the in-basket by handling patient messages. And there are two different ways you can view it: before a message is sent and after a message is sent by a patient. Before a message is sent, we actually said, look, a lot of these, if there's a defect or an issue with a patient not being able to get what they need done, and there's a navigation breakdown somehow, that breakdown is going to end up in the form of a message that they're going to send their clinicians. So we can actually provide folks with a guided experience where we can understand their intent and apply the appropriate, both machine learning, like traditional, like conventional machine learning, as well as more sophisticated LLM against the messages that they send us and basically intercept. And we do what we call message deflection. So we gather their utterances, what they're telling us, and then we can evaluate it. And the intent recognition engine works really well and then connects them to fulfillment partners. And we can understand the intent of between 85 and 90% of what our patients are telling us. And we can actually convert them into a partner fulfillment track for about 50 to 60%. So we're able to deflect about 30% of the administrative messages that our patients would be generating. So that's like right off the top. And then another thing, that's what we call our conversation and navigation platform. She shows herself in the form of a Grace. We call our chatbot Grace, but we also have other mechanisms for how we can interact with our patients in our messaging clients and things like that. Now imagine in some scenarios, the message still has to get sent. And our clinical informatics team has built a solution that they call ARIA, Automatic Real-Time In-Basket Assistant. And ARIA basically takes the message, applies a different set of intent recognition, understanding what the context of the message is, combines it with the clinical context from that individual patient, and then supports the provider in a rapid response sort of writing of a message. ARIA has reduced our response time for our clinicians who are activated on it by 50%. So on average, response time used to be about 48 hours. Now it's 24 hours. So patients are getting responded to much more quickly, and our providers aren't experiencing greater burden. The last example I'll give is actually a partner example, which is in the domain of what we call documentation and charting. And writing notes and things like that. Our clinicians spend a tremendous amount of time doing that work. And we've partnered with Nuance to pilot a solution called DAX Copilot, which supports our clinicians through an ambient listening technology and helps them do the documentation and chart completion and closure and everything, and has given our clinicians like between 1 and 4 hours a day back, so that they don't have to be sitting there. They're more present in the context of the actual patient visit, but then they don't have to do what is called pajama time, which is the time that our doctors go home and then they are doing all this work. They're closing out their charts, they're documenting everything. It has significantly reduced that. So those are real, like in production use cases that we're working on with an underlying infrastructure of really high quality data, and then machine learning and LLM ops that are annotating data, that are monitoring performance post-deployment, that are validating models pre-deployment, that are supporting us, like providing a kill switch if something starts to go wrong, and then we can turn off the model, test it, refine it, retune, and then turn it back on. All of these types of things that allow us to do this at scale and responsibly.
And now, before we dive deeper, I want to take a quick moment and tell you a little bit about one of our podcast partners. As a listener of this show, I know you're trying to stay on top of all things AI and tech, which is why you have to check out the amazing GeekWire podcast, produced by GeekWire and hosted by Todd Bishop. It's a treasure of insights featuring industry leaders and the latest tech trends that are shaping our world. It's the perfect companion podcast to Shift AI. GeekWire podcast is where technology meets curiosity and covers the world of technology, startups, and geek culture. Expand your tech horizons and join the conversation. Tune into the GeekWire podcast today, a perfect complement to our own discussions here. Don't miss out. Follow the GeekWire podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite listening app. Now back to the episode. Well, that's a good segue, because I wanted to ask you about the challenges, especially in such a highly regulated industry as yours. I'm sure privacy is an issue. You're dealing with all sorts of regulatory stuff. What are some of the things that everyone's dealing with, but that you guys are dealing with in particular in regards to just challenges that you face?
The challenges around privacy, I think, are just they're present, and they're a little bit more complex, and have caused us to have to do additional kind of reflection and thinking around. For instance, are we going to share our data with a third party to help them train their models? Our answer has been generally no. We don't want to do that. At some point, data can be identifiable, and we don't want to risk that. So there are privacy challenges. There's a huge amount of noise out there right now. There's a lot of companies emerging, and it's a bit difficult to navigate like the signal from the noise. Everybody wants something better, something more advanced, and what's real, what's slideware, what's vaporware, all of that is getting harder and harder to discern unless you go deep and like do a technical analysis. Which we have the ability to do because we have the team, but you can't do it for everything. So we've been very focused and intentional about the areas where we are going deep, because we think that they're strategically important to in particular, the health and well-being of our clinicians and the service that we're providing to our patients. Another like more kind of geeky technical area is that, there's like the observability layer here around monitoring, around ensuring like a performance is up to what we expect or better. It doesn't universally exist today. And so every solution, either the ones that we are building or the ones that we're partnering with, we have kind of two options. Either we build it in a sort of full stack way where we build in the observability mechanisms ourselves. And we've done that largely because we believe that we are accountable for monitoring performance and we want to do the right thing by our patients and our clinicians. Or we leave it up to a partner to do it. And we're not necessarily comfortable doing that. They may not have the transparency for us to be able to validate, does this meet our standards or does it not meet our standards? And so development of that observability layer has become an area of significant focus for us. And I'll give you the example of like on my team where we're building the navigation platform. about 40% of our resources are dedicated to monitoring LLM ops and observability, and 60% is dedicated to feature development. So it's a lot of resources dedicated to that sort of responsible AI deployment per use case. And then the last thing is kind of a variation on a theme, which is that today we don't have open standards. The government and the regulatory bodies don't really have the proper tools to kind of keep pace. And the hyperscalers, like there's a lot of like, well, what keeps us proprietary? Our foundation model is going to keep them sort of differentiated, or all those going to kind of be the same? Like, where is the differentiation? So we don't have open standard creation yet. And that in some ways is causing a lot more duplication, because if you want to build a use case and you don't have an open standard, you're going to build it full stack again. And so then there's going to be all of these different solutions with a whole lot of like heavy firepower associated with them. And it's going to make it a little bit more difficult for, like, I think earlier companies over time to be able to keep pace. And then you're going to have all of these like, okay, well, what standard are you going to use down the line? So we're going to get there. There's a bit of a chicken and the egg problem as well. And I think, these are all kind of symptoms of we're very early in the maturity.
That's right. Yeah, it seems like there's opportunities for small businesses to start building some of these layers that can help you guys.
Absolutely. The challenge for them is getting really deeply engaged with folks who know the operations, know what we're dealing with, and they can build to like the proper requirements, because it's really tough, and in particular in healthcare, like workflow is everything. I think clinical workflow is everything. And so there's certainly opportunity to do it right.
Can you talk a little bit about the partnerships that you guys have developed over time? I mean, it sounds like there's some challenges, but also there's some breakthroughs, and you guys are developing some interesting things with outside partners. Can you speak to that and talk about that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. The products that I mentioned that we're building today, for instance, Aria, and is really done in collaboration with Microsoft. We work really closely with them on cloud, on our data platforms. Microsoft does a lot of interesting things around sort of innovation grants that support organizations, in building out use cases, experimental sort of features. So we work closely with them, and we work closely with smaller companies as well. That sometimes have like a really niche, understanding of a specific domain. We're working with a company called Pariah Health that we actually incubated, focused on identity-driven personalization. And what that basically means is know me as a user, and then connect my identity to identities of other third-party providers, as well as the stuff in the system to get me what I need. So, a woman in her 40s living in Seattle will have different needs from a man in his 60s living in Portland, Oregon, and if he has a chronic condition, right? So like we all have different needs, and that personalization, it really matters. And so we're working with a small company called Pariah to do that work, to really, and do it across an ecosystem. It's not just about Providence, it's about Prov and all of our partners and everybody that we can kind of bring into the ecosystem to provide whole person care. So we have a very much like both build and buy approach.
Well, you touched on this a little before in terms of the leadership that mentored you, but I also know and noticed that you're on a lot of boards, you're an advisor to a lot of companies, so you're mentoring a lot of other people. So can we talk a little bit about mentorship and your experience of giving and getting mentorship along the way? You can name names if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll name the person that I always reference when that comes up first for me. Our Providence's former chief digital officer, his name is Aaron Martin. He's actually back now at Amazon as a VP of healthcare there. But he was not just a mentor, but he sponsored me actively. And it wasn't just, nice conversations. There was actual action behind it. I was given really high profile projects and exposure and deep, context by being in specific settings that really helped me understand the bigger picture, that gave me a role in the mission critical work of the system. And he encouraged me to do very specific things that I was actually not very naturally inclined to do, that positioned me for a lot of opportunities that came from that. So for instance, he really encouraged me to do public speaking and to go and join panels and podcasts. And that was something that I was very hesitant to do. But through that, I met a lot of amazing people. And I then got invited to be on a board because I knew some folks. And then the network grew and sort of reinforced itself. And I was sort of the person that was the bench scientist. That's what I thought of myself as. I was a researcher, and he really encouraged me to develop the capabilities and the comfort level with new skills and new things that I needed. So that was really critical. And I try to encourage either individuals or our companies to kind of explore in that way. And the other thing that Aaron taught me and that I've really seen play out just experientially has been the importance of getting deep on a problem and not just staying at the surface. And that has helped. One, it's really fun, right? Because you really get to understand something at a level of depth that reveals cool things about the way the world works, or the way that people are, or the way that you need to create a value proposition to sell something. It really is so much more interesting than just managing moving little pieces around, and he really taught me that. And the depth is probably the thing that I enjoy bringing the most, even in my board role. It's not getting in the way of management, but it's really about supporting the companies I work with and the people I work with, and in whatever capacity, in solving those problems deeply. And I love that. And it really multiplies. It's not just about me. I can only do so much as one individual, but our healthcare system has so many challenges. We need as many brilliant people tackling these problems deeply as we possibly can.
Yeah, for sure. And giving people that kind of leeway to do that and take responsibility is important, for sure. So as you think about the future, and this could be AI related or not, but as you look into the future of healthcare in particular, what are some of the things that you're thinking about in terms of advancements, or as you look around the corner, that things that you see coming that maybe others don't?
Well, I don't know if there's anything I see coming that others don't. I think it's probably I'm just learning from other folks. But I think we talked a little bit about maturity. I mean, we ain't seen nothing yet. It's going to get super exciting. 25 is really going to, I think, have a lot of development in sort of agents. And some people kind of, I think, overstate it, say agents for everything. I don't think that's necessarily true, but if you play around with the tools, you can start to see how they're going to start supporting people in all tasks, professional, personal. And that is, I think they're getting more sophisticated and more useful very rapidly.
Patients and doctors, actually.
Patients and doctors and just people, in our administrative roles too, there's a lot for us there. So I think 25, we're going to have a lot more. That's kind of how we think about our navigation platform, is an agent for our patients and helping them get whatever it is that they need to get done. Search is going to be completely disrupted. It's already being disrupted. And I think search within the context of healthcare is going to be disrupted because we're going to have so much more ability to bring in not only sort of real world evidence or scientific evidence into decision making, but also just basic additional context at the point of care, and being able to essentially mine intent, mine other sorts of context in real life, in real time. So I get very excited about those things. And I think that 25, we're going to see a huge amount of movement there. And then, there is this really interesting paper that's been sort of making its way around Silicon Valley over the last several months. And it's called Situational Awareness, written by a gentleman who worked very closely with the OpenAI team. Aschenbrenner is his last name. And situational awareness really articulates that we're still at the very beginning stages of just the raw computing and unhobbling of AI. As AI starts to build more AI, and we are going to get to AGI relatively soon if we continue to advance at the sort of trajectory that we're on right now. The possibilities get very, very interesting. And I think that really may start to bring costs down. And in the context of healthcare, I think that what it fundamentally means is, one, we got to overall bend the cost curve, of course, because it's consuming too much GDP. But in addition to that, it's just unaffordable for people. And there are companies out there that are doing fascinating things like, let's make primary care as inexpensive as a bus ticket. I think the name of the company that is Curai. And I don't know if that's what they still say, but like when they started out, that's how they were talking about it. And that's so exciting, actually making healthcare available for everybody and making it affordable. So if we use it for good, I think that all of those things are possible. And I get really excited about it.
Yeah. Well, if you listen to the podcast, you know that I always ask the same question at the end. And so I'll ask the question to you too. It's, as you think about the future of work, your work in healthcare and the future of healthcare, if you were to describe that in two words only, and then you can elaborate, but what would those two words be?
I'll use only one word and say democratized. And what I mean by that is overcoming information barriers and overcoming geographic barriers, overcoming hopefully structural barriers. That's what I would hope that we can accomplish with the future of work. And that, we don't have to get too political, but like then not everybody has to work as much as they do.
Well, say more about that.
Maybe I'll get very philosophical and say, human beings are more than their work. And hopefully this frees us up to enjoy art and family and society and contribution to where we live, who we live with, preservation of our planet, all of these things in a way that can be hard to do when you're spending all your time grinding away. So that's what I hope for.
I love it. Well, it's a great way to end the show. And I really appreciate your time today. It's very interesting to think about how fast things are moving in this space. And so we'll have to have you back. And as things develop, talk more about healthcare and AI. So Sara, thank you again. It was really nice talking with you today.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
That's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. Such a pleasure to have Sara Vaezy as our guest on today's episode. Sara brings a unique perspective on how AI is being implemented in one of America's leading healthcare systems, showing us the real-world applications of this technology in a mission-critical industry. Her insights into clinical care augmentation, patient experience enhancement, and administrative streamlining gives us a glimpse into how AI is not just improving processes, but potentially revolutionizing healthcare delivery. If you want to stay connected with Sara, you can find her on LinkedIn. If you're interested in her insights on integrating AI into healthcare and digital transformation, definitely connect with her and keep up with her posts and activities online. I continue to be amazed by the guests we've had on the show, and I'm excited about the ones joining us in the near future. I truly appreciate you spending your time with us. Thank you for listening to this episode, and don't forget to subscribe to the Shift AI podcast for more exciting interviews, and to the Augmented AI newsletter for updates on how AI can help you scale your business. The Shift AI podcast is syndicated by GeekWire, and we are grateful to have the show sponsored by Augmented AI Labs. Our theme music was created by Dave Angel.